All right, if you just do it, it'll turn out okay. Hello, everyone. It's Vendilla 1998 here, and we're back for more Talking Time with Caffeine, Season 8. My guest today is, well, I'll let him introduce himself.
All right. Hello, my name is Walker. I have a YouTube channel called Just a Walking Fish, which I unfortunately haven't been able to upload on in like the past month or so, but I do have plans, so don't worry. Yeah, so that's...
So what's the purpose of your channel?
Okay. Well, basically, I am an evolutionary biology major, so this is the kind of stuff that interests me, and it's something that I can't really talk about too often openly, I guess, just because I'm from rural Alabama, and with the whole like coronavirus and schools shut down and stuff, I'm back living with my parents. And so, I just thought, hey, it might be fun to get involved with this community because it's been something I've been sort of watching for a bit, and might as well put myself out there, I guess.
So are you a doctor fish yet, or a master fish, or just a bachelor fish?
No, I'm an undergraduate fish right now.
Oh, associate fish.
Yeah. Not even that yet, but that's all right.
Yeah, I gotta respect people who can finish college. I went to college and I failed miserably at it.
Really? Well, I mean, it's not for everybody, but like, it's all right. I think honestly, the biggest point of getting a degree is getting a piece of paper that says you got a degree. You know what I mean? Yeah. I don't think you really need to go to college to learn stuff at this point. It's just so that for job stuff. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Well, I wanted to be a history teacher at the time, so
really
kind of need. I think I need a college degree for that.
Mm. So I'm just saying, if you're interested in it, altruistically, you don't need a degree.
Yeah,
in my opinion, at least.
Yeah, most of the time I've learned is I learned via books and YouTube now, but still,
yeah.
At the time I wanted to be a history a teacher, but I think you need a degree for that. Still, I'm not positive, but but I probably don't want somebody coming off the street like, hey, I want to be a teacher. Like, okay, you're a teacher now.
Yeah.
Like some people like say Kent off the street, like say, I'll be a teacher.
Yeah, Patriot University or whatever. Isn't that the thing? Hello, my name is Kent Hovind. That's
oh yeah. In the third season, me and my guest, a few episodes, we went over his thesis.
His doctoral thesis, you read it out loud.
Yeah, a few episodes. You go check out season 3.
Yeah.
So what made you have an interest in biology?
Well, biology specifically, I don't really know. It's just something that how people just have interest. But I sort of grew up creationist-ish. I was definitely I'm from a pretty evangelical Methodist household, and I never necessarily learned that evolution is false, but I was definitely taught things like biblical literalism and creationism and that kind of stuff as a kid. I was just never really introduced to the apologetic side of it.
Yeah.
And then I sort of started looking more into it, I guess. And I got really interested in Pleistocene megafauna, and really the Cenozoic as a whole. I think that's a really cool time period. And now I'm just sort of interested in phylogeny, phylogenetics, evolutionary biology, and evolutionary that kind of stuff. It's just I don't know. I don't really know. Huh.
Oh, yeah. Cool. Oh, that's you. That's you. Anyways, so let's go back. Talk about the thing. I don't know if it's in your slideshow or not, but if we go there, we'll start about the beginning. So, how did our rivalry with the rayfin fish start?
How did our rivalry start?
Yeah, with our rayfin cousins.
Well, do you want me to pull up the slideshow presentation that I started?
Sure, I know that's part of it or not, but
let me. Oh, crap. Sorry.
Because I know that was from our thing that I can't pronounce it.
Sarcopterygil.
Yeah, and when we used to be all bony fish, and then we split. Then I think that was the first split with our cousins. We split with the ray finned. Like probably back in I know, was it the Devonian or the one before that?
It was in the middle to late Silurian. Yeah. I put you'll have to accept the slideshow thing. Yeah. So I have Sarcopterygil. We're all just walking fish, right?
Yeah.
So yeah, Osteichthyes contains all bony fish, and our sister group would be like Chondrichthyes. And Actinopterygii would be the ray fin fish, whereas Sarcopterygii is the bony fish, or the what is it? The lobe-limbed fish. That's what it is. So it's really interesting because Sarcopterygii used to be much more prevalent in the water back in like the Devonian, Carboniferous, up until really the Triassic, and then Actinopterygii started taking over.
Well, by that point we were most of the Sarcopterygii are on land. They're like whatever.
Yeah. Something interesting about that is Sarcopterygii is. I mean, I consider us fish, right? That's sort of that's the joke behind my name, I guess.
Yeah.
But there's actually only 8 species within Sarcopterygii that are still like fish. You have 2 species of coelacanths and 6 species of lungfish. Yeah, and then all other 30,000 are land animals. Except for the
I guess not really. Except for the brief time the amphibians are like the states.
Yeah, you have like sirenians and axolotls, but they're still like descended from land, like terrestrial vertebrates. But yeah, so that's something kind of funny. And something kind of interesting about this split is like the lung, which I feel like is one of the most characteristic things of us land vertebrates. It actually probably predates this split.
Yeah, like I think I something about a swim. There used to be a swim bladder or something.
Yeah, well, so what Darwin wrote in Origin of Species is that the lung probably evolved from the swim bladder, but recent studies have sort of flipped that around, and they're thinking that swim bladders, Actinopterygians, evolved from lungs. So we actually know that primitive Actinopterygians, such as bichirs, have you ever heard of bichirs?
Nope, but I have today.
Yeah, that's true. Well, bichirs actually have a very primitive lung, and they can survive outside of water as long as they stay humid. And it's thought that the lung started as like a multifunctional organ that was partially used for respiration and partially used for like buoyancy control, right? So that's kind of a cool thing. And then it just sort of like specialized in different lineages. So
sweet. Okay, so we're like we split. Okay, first we split from the sharks, the cards. Now we split from the ray fin fish, and we're battling for the ocean. At this time, I guess we're all still. I guess at this point we're all still hiding from the Dunkleosteus still.
Yeah. The placoderms were still the big boys in town. They were the ones we were hiding from. But then after we split from Actinopterygii in the late Silurian, the earliest, I have a picture. This is one of the earliest lobe-fin fish that we know of. It's gui. I really don't know how to pronounce this one. I'm kind of stuck on this one. But it's one of the earliest lobe-fin fish from about 420 million years ago. And looking at that, you definitely don't see much of a resemblance. It looks more like a tuna or like a grouper than.
How big was this guy? Was he big enough to eat us, or is he still in the small share?
Oh gosh, I don't remember how big Gui was. If I remember correctly, it was about a meter. Most of the early or Gui. Oh wait, no. It was very small actually. It was about 30 centimeters.
Okay. Yeah. By the way, listen, I don't know how this works in the ocean. I know how natural waters here, but so how did we stop? Do you know the speciation event? Do we know the speciation event that stopped us from breeding with our ray fin cousins? So we had different gene pools and stuff.
I have no idea. I mean, I know a lot of at least like modern and potent. Well, okay, so modern lobefin fish such as coelacanths are primarily deep sea creatures.
Yeah.
So it had to do with like differences in depth, but I really don't know.
I was wondering. I was wondering how things when and how things speciate, because you know on land, rivers can happen or mountains can pop up, or obviously just the different languages pop up. Different I like that song he's singing. I'm not gonna breed with him.
Yeah, well, there's still natural barriers in the water, even if it's like harder to distinguish. Like if you have a shallow water creature, it's not going to be able to get across a continent.
Yeah.
Or like the shallow water animals that live over in the Mediterranean are very different from the ones we have in the Gulf. Or say
there's like a big lake and part of it dries up and there's the two fish on different water things like they can't breed with each other anymore.
Yeah. And so here I have the coelacanths in Actinistia.
Right, so yeah, there's other different things for the people living that says people are like, oh, like how did they disappear for 65 million years?
Yeah, that's something is pretty funny. They're a pretty commonly cited example of something known as like a Lazarus taxa, which is where you expect something to be dead, you found fossils of it, and then it just appears one day, and you have no idea how they got there. And the reason that Latimeria, the genus of currently living coelacanths, probably didn't leave many fossils, or at least we haven't found many fossils, is because, like I said, they live in the deep sea.
Is the two on the bottom are living things, or the?
Yeah, well, actually, just the one on the very bottom, Latimeria. All the rest of them are extinct.
So there's two. So the same genus or species. I thought there were two different parts of the ocean, different species.
Well, yeah. So we have two living species within Latimeria.
Okay.
So something. The reason I had this up here is because, I know it's not like the point of my conversation, I guess, but a lot of creationists always talk about, oh, well, it's a living fossil, therefore evolution is false. And it's just it doesn't work because obviously, you can see by these morphologically, they're very different. Yeah. They're within like the same, I don't know, some huge Linnaean rank, but within that rank, they're extremely different. And here are the two living ones, right? So you have the West Indian coelacanth and the Indonesian coelacanth.
They look pretty big.
Yeah, they're over a meter. I think they can grow up to about 1.5 meters. And even going further, I think with the whole creationism thing, I think it's kind of funny because I think coelacanths are a pretty good argument against creationism, and I guess Linnaean taxonomy for that matter, because they're considered part of the same genus. But genetically, they're super, super different. These two species are, despite being in the same genus, are separated by about 40 million years. So that's about as divergent as we are from like New World monkeys, so capuchins and spider monkeys.
Yeah, one of them looks like more camouflage. The blue one looks more like I don't know, it's dark. It looks like it should be more camouflagey than the other one would be.
Yeah, well, it might just be the lighting. Actually, I really don't know. I don't. If I saw him in the wild, I would be like, oh, it's a coelacanth. I'd probably recognize it as a coelacanth, but I don't think I could actually tell what the difference was, So
when did we split from our coelacanth cousins?
Oh, well, we split from them about 400 million years ago, right?
Yeah.
Because the next most basal group would be Rhipidistia. And dipnoi is lungfish, but Rhipidistia includes lungfish and us, right?
Yeah.
And that's what's sister to Actinistia.
That means, like, if I remember correctly from when I was watching that series, we had like similar, like two lungs or like symmetry lungs, something like that?
I don't know what it stands for.
But apparently these guys these guys here, they lost their bony limbs. Most of them looks like.
Yeah, they kind of have like the little wormy thing going on.
Yeah, you think they'd be with the Rayfin fish if genetics didn't say otherwise.
Yeah, well, they do have some pretty interesting morphological characteristics that group them with us, right? So they have some synapomorphies, like their upper jaw is attached to their skull, which obviously, if you feel it, our upper jaw is attached to our skull. And that's something not found anywhere outside of Rhipidistia. So that's why some fish, you can see them like they protrude their jaw outward whenever they're biting another fish or like sucking something up. So that's a little interesting thing. They also, some of them are even like obligate air breathers. So they have pretty good lungs. All of them except for the Australian lungfish would actually drown if you held them underwater. So that's kind of funny.
So they have to go up in the air. The thing there's almost kind of like whales and dolphins in that sense, almost.
Yeah. Well, but that was probably secondarily lost because we have pretty good evidence that Tiktaalik had gills.
Yeah.
It's just kind of interesting, and it's helped them, survive in poor oxygenated water and like swampy environments and stuff.
They went from Australia, Africa, South America, and
then the bottom one's just a picture of like a Devonian lungfish. So back, when they first arrived, like 350-ish million years ago.
So only these three then are the current living species then?
Well, there's actually 6 species. So you have the Australian lungfish, which are in their own family, and I think even their own order. And then you have African and South American lungfish, which are grouped more closely together because, Gondwana. The Australian lungfish are actually very different from the other two. But like the Australian lungfish only have one lung, whereas the other two have 2 lungs like us. So that's just an interesting thing. And then after Rhipidistia, we start to get to Tetrapodomorpha, which something a little fishy going on with these guys, right? So, these are obviously more closely related to us than lungfish, but they still look pretty fish-like. But if you notice, Megalithes actually had the beginnings of nostrils on it, right? Ah. So we're looking at a fish with nostrils and bony limbs. But its nostrils were only used for like olfactory purposes. It couldn't actually breathe through its nose yet. Well, I guess it didn't have a nose, but it couldn't breathe through its nostrils yet. It could just use it as like a scent. It could pick up scents in the water. And another middle-ish derived tetrapodomorph is Rhizodus, which is actually the biggest freshwater species of all time. So that's a pretty cool one. It could grow up to about 7 meters, which would have made it dwarf a great white. So they could probably could eat this if they wanted to. Oh, easily, yeah. I don't have a picture of it like with a diver, but the scale that's under Rhizodus is 1 meter. So 2 of those would be a person, and that barely takes up half of its. That honestly. The real Rhizodus would be even larger than that scale because, like I said, they could be up to 7 meters, and that one looks about like 5. So these were very, very large fish. I think the only fish that are bigger than it that currently live would be like whale sharks. And they lived in freshwater. They lived in like large lakes and that kind of stuff. So it's a little scary. And then here we have Eotropoda Forms. That's our next split? Yeah, that would be the next split. Well, so the problem is with Linnaean taxonomy is that we don't really characterize every single split. Sometimes we just have like crown and stem lineages. Yeah, I thought don't we have cladistics now for that kind of thing? Yeah, but still, a lot of times you don't name every single split. You just name like the big splits, or like the big breakthroughs in evolution.
Yeah, and then the little ones, like very the big ones don't get counted. Like we're not important.
So like Tenerao, Eosinopteron, and Panderichthes, all of these would be Eotropoda Forms. But Panderichthes is closer related to us than Tenerao or Eosinopteron would be.
So are we that too or not?
Yes, we are. We're in this as well. What I'm doing is I'm going down the line towards tetrapods. So
I didn't know if that's our cousin group or our own group.
Yeah, well, Eotropoda Forms is our own group, but all of the ones pictured are cousins for sure.
Okay. But they're like you said, some of them are more closer to us than other ones.
Yeah. So, out of all three of these, Panderichthes would be the most closely related to us.
You can see its flat head shape coming out on that one.
Yeah, you're starting to see what is it called? Like a lateral flattening of it, and then we're also starting to see certain bones appearing in the limbs. You can kind of see in Tenerao. I have at the end of the slideshow like a list of transitions of the arm bones and stuff. But this is where we're starting to find things like the fibia and the tibia and the fibula. Those were all present in Tenerao and it was present in all three of them. And then Eosinopteron would have had the beginnings of digits as well. It would have had the bones that are at least analogous to digits. Okay. And then we're seeing like a transitional pelvic girdle in all of these as well. Like they couldn't bear weight, but they were beginning to have the modern ratios for like limbs and pelvic structure.
Right. So they're like almost, were they walking on the bottom of the river yet? Or?
Panderichthes probably. The other two probably would have been like open swimming. But yeah, so Panderichthes actually has primitive wrists, which is an interesting thing. It also has primitive elbows and reduction of fin rays, which you can kind of see. One trend that we're going to see as we go down the line is that the fin rays are going to get smaller and smaller, and the digits are going to become more prominent.
Yeah. It looks like the back tail is getting smaller and smaller too.
Yeah, that's another thing. I didn't really mention that too much, but yeah, that's definitely a thing that we see as we get closer to tetrapods, because they're going from fish tails to like salamander tails. So I guess the next big thing would be Stegosaphalia, which these are the ones that everyone's heard of for the most part. Right, we got like Tiktaalik, Acanthostega, and Ichthyostega. And interestingly, so in the previous fish, in these guys, there's something known as the intracranial joint, which we're starting to see a fusion of the intracranial joint. And by the time we get to Panderichthes, the intracranial joint exists on the inside of the cranium, but not the outside of the cranium. So it could have like a little bit more flexion, but not entirely. And by the time we get to Stegosaphalians, the intracranial joint has completely closed up. And also we see that the pectoral girdle has separated from the back of the skull, which means that these fish have necks now. So now we're looking at fish with necks, digits, wrists, elbows, nostrils. It's honestly kind of hard to draw the line where it becomes not a fish. That's why these are sometimes also known as fishopods.
I heard that word before. So which one is what's one? Who do we split? Who do we kind of say split from first? So
Tiktaalik would be the most basal out of all of these, right? Tiktaalik is generally considered the most basal Stegosaphalian. It definitely wasn't a direct ancestor, and it still would have spent time in the water. We have evidence to believe that it had gills and probably didn't ever leave the water. But this is definitely one of the fish that was holding on to the bottom in fast-moving streams, that kind of stuff. Yeah. And probably, honestly, lived a little bit like an alligator or something. Like and also we know that Tiktaalik wasn't a direct ancestor because we have tracks from probably something more morphologically similar to Ichthyostega from around the time that Tiktaalik was found. But it's still a very important transitional fossil, right?
Yeah. Yeah. Too bad we can't get DNA from fossil saddles. Otherwise,
yeah, that would be so cool if we could, but unfortunately,
stupid DNA for so long.
Yeah, and then Acanthostega is slightly more closely related to us than like Tiktaalik would be.
Yeah, you can start to see the little finger starting to show a little bit there.
Yeah, well, okay, so Tiktaalik was, as far as we know, the last one to have the rays. So the rays on the fins are actually not analogous to the bones that we have. If I remember correctly, they're more similar to like our fingernail structure or something, but don't quote me on that. I think I've heard it somewhere else. And that's obviously what gives the ray fin fish their names, right? They use those rays to swim, whereas in most of these low-finned fish, you see a reduction of the rays and more prominence of bones. And you see Acanthostega has completely gotten rid of the rays and now only has bones, which pretty much look like digits at this point. It has 8 of them. It has 8 digits. Has a very flexible neck. And it probably could go out of the water, but it wouldn't be very good at it. Because its pectoral and pelvic girdles just couldn't support any weight, really. It could probably flop around, but it, wouldn't have gone out of water for like extended amounts of time or like to hunt.
So not like the thing shows when they first came out. It's like, oh, it's can move on land.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I mean, it obviously created a pretty strong selective pressure to like get all of these, because honestly, the transition between the earliest Sarcopterygian fish in the late-ish Silurian to the earliest tetrapods happened in something like 60 million years or 70 million years. Because we have true tetrapods from like the mid to late Devonian, right? Most of these guys came out about 375, 380 million years ago. So that's a pretty fast transition, in my opinion, to get from fish to legs and lungs and breathing and stuff. It's something interesting about Ichthyostega. You start to see a reduction in the number of digits. So Acanthostega had 8 digits, whereas Ichthyostega has 7. Or does it have? Yeah, it has 7. And also, Ichthyostega, we know for a fact it could get out of the water. And it probably hopped around like a seal or like a mud skipper would. Because its pectoral muscles would have been strong enough to easily support its weight, but its range of motion was too small to actually walk around in the twisting amphibian style. So, it was flopping. It was just good at flopping.
Sweet. And then finally we get so we're from Tiktaalik, the Stega to Ichthyostega.
Yep. So that's pretty much the last of the fishopods. Oh, what?
And sorry, it was Ichthyostega the one that had the 8 fingers, the 9 fingers?
Acanthostega had 8 fingers. Ichthyostega had 7.
Okay.
So we're starting to see a decrease in finger or digit number to the point where 5 is becoming standardized.
And I was sure not, but I heard like the fingers that merged together became our future thumb or big toe, whatever.
What did you say? I'm sorry, I didn't quite catch that.
I'm not sure, but I heard that the ones that disappeared or used together became our thumb or our big toe eventually.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure some of them were just lost because there was like some sort of mutation in the Hox gene that if it changes the gradient. But I think some of them also did fuse to have like thickening. Yeah,
I also heard, on the positive, I also heard that more fingers is actually the more dominant gene.
Yeah, that is true. Polydactyly is dominant. So if someone has 6 fingers, it's more than likely that their kid's going to have 6 fingers. It's just a very rare mutation, but it's definitely not. It's not recessive at all. So that is an interesting thing. Though I don't think that mutation can be traced back to these guys. I think that's
Okay.
an independent mutation
Okay.
that's arisen recently-ish.
Okay.
Yeah. And so pretty much that more or less ends the fishopods and takes us to tetrapods. So here I have, pictures of the different transitions. The one on the left would be the change in skull morphology from that of like a fish to, what we have now. It has like the pictures of the different ones as well. And then the right would be evolution of a hand from, the teleos, or not teleos, but like the osteichthyes like base. So, you see certain bones like the radius and the ulna starting to appear, and you see the wrist becoming its own individual thing, whereas the digits are migrating up and becoming their own separate thing as well.
Yeah. See, a little hard to see right here on the tiny screen.
Yeah.
On the words, but yeah, it looks like at least on the wrist thing, our closest relative is the Tiktaalik one.
Mm-hmm. The closest one, I think Tiktaalik is the one second to left, or second to right, and the one all the way on the right is Acanthostega. So I don't have Ichthyostega up here, but Ichthyostega is similar to Acanthostega. At that point, they had almost had the tetrapod foot plan. They just didn't have the correct number of digits or the correct length of the bones, that kind of stuff.
All right.
Yeah. And then let me see. And then I have one more slide. So here we have things that are so similar to tetrapods, it's almost like hard to tell. We don't have a super complete record of all the transitions that happen, but we do have enough to where it's confusing as to where to draw the line, right?
Yeah.
So, we have things like Telurpeton, which would have had 6 digits, unlike us. But it definitely could have left the water. It was probably an obligate air breather because it didn't have gills, right? So it had to breathe air.
So was that the first one that had no gills, or was Ichthyosaurus, the Ichthyosaurus one still have gills, or was it all ones at that point?
If I remember correctly, Ichthyostega and Acanthostega did not have gills.
Okay.
Whereas Tiktaalik did. But I might be wrong on that. But you can still do gas exchange and stuff. Like
this one was definitely pure lung.
But yeah, this one definitely had to breathe air. And it probably had a lifestyle similar to something like a crocodile, where it still was adapted primarily to the water. But it could leave the water. And then you have Anthracosaurs, right, which would be Seamoria, I have on the right.
Which is, you can basically see it can stand up. It can stand pretty well on land.
Yeah. So as soon as you get to the clade Tetrapoda, you have a split between Lysamphibia and like Timnospondyla, which is basically amphibians, and then Reptilomorphs, which would be us.
Yeah, I think if I remember correctly, they're the ones. Reptilomorphs. They have the skin that can they have the skin that can survive on land more dryly, but they still have to lay their eggs in the water to get the amniotes.
Yeah. I'm pretty sure the nodal quote unquote definition for Reptilomorph is just anything more closely related to us than amphibians.
I think it'd be more things that doesn't have waterproof, not like skin. You don't need to keep the skin moisturized.
Yeah, well, you do see that as a general trend as you go forward within reptilomorphs, because obviously we're adapted to land now. Yeah. So you start to see the animals. Eventually, you get to amniota where they don't need the water other than to drink anymore.
It's too bad there's no at least as far as I know, there's no non-amniote reptilomorphs that survived.
Yeah. Well, I mean, they probably, if I had to guess, would have been something similar to like a toad in lifestyle, where they don't necessarily need water except to reproduce. Like that's how Seamoria most likely was. We have pretty good evidence that Seamoria only had to return to the water to lay its eggs, right? And most of its life was spent on land. And at this point, we're in like the early Carboniferous. So
were the giant insects and amphibians ruled the world.
Yeah, yeah. I find it funny that I guess they're going to onto the land to escape things like Dunkleosteus and Rhizodus.
Little did we know that their time was about to end.
Yeah, they come on land and they find a spider that's like 1 meter, and what's that one? It's a myriapod that's like 6 or 7 meters long.
Yeah. But I mean, I mean, as I don't know if it would be good or not, but like sometimes like a lot of oxygen that'd be good for some people who have breathing problems. There's some oxygen for you. 80% oxygen. No, was that?
Yeah, that's. I wonder if we had higher oxygen levels, if insects would still come back to be huge, because obviously gas exchange is probably a big problem that they face when the gas is lower. But like, also they now have predators and competition on land.
It's fun. I don't know. It's fun. It's funny though. The oxygen level was pretty high back then, but the carbon level had to be pretty high too. Otherwise, because it seems like a pretty tropical environment. So you think that the carbon would have to be high too for be that warm?
I don't actually know. I don't know the geology behind it. I guess that would make sense. Although I do know things like water vapor are an even better insulator than carbon dioxide. So if you can have an atmosphere with more water, and that might be affected by the oxygen. I have no idea.
Personally, and I heard, I don't know if it's true or not, the documentary I saw that the higher oxygen also made the environment more flammable too.
Really? Yeah, that actually makes a lot of sense. That honestly, the Carboniferous has done nothing but been burned for the past few million years. If it's not fires from the actual Carboniferous to now, we're just lighting everything on fire.
I asked in the past, like, what's your opinion on America dividing killing the Carboniferous and making it in the Mississippian and the Pennsylvanian?
Ooh, I really don't have too much of an opinion. I don't know much about those periods. I know some stuff about like the fauna that lived in them, but I don't necessarily.
I talked about with corporate Aeon, like apparently America turns the Carboniferous into 2 periods instead of making them 2 like little small epochs and their own 2 periods. Like it always confused me. So, anyways,
yeah. I mean, I think it's really all subjective where you end up drawing the lines.
True.
Like, we have the Cenozoic lasting like, as you get closer to modern day, the periods get so much shorter.
Or they start getting we start going to epochs or like eras and smaller divided in smaller areas.
Yeah. Well, I mean, oh, sorry. Go ahead.
Like in the beginning, we're just like everything was Eon before the Carboniferous, before the Cambrian, like the Eon, the Hadrian Eon, the Achaean Eon, the whatever Eon that was next. Then let's start dividing up into periods and then epochs and whatever.
Yeah, well, I think it's also sort of like a human bias thing because you have the Paleozoic, which lasted like 300 million years, and then you have the Mesozoic, which lasted like 200-ish, and then you have the Cenozoic, which has been going on for like 50 or 60 million years. So as you get closer to present day, the general trend is for the time periods to get smaller.
True. Is that the end of your slideshow?
Yeah, well, I mean, pretty much. I had another slide with just some sources that I was using. I think I talked about all of them except for the 13 million year divergence. Hey, Speed. So basically, within the one species of Indonesian coelacanths, there's 2 separate populations which have a divergence time of 13 million years, which means that they're more genetically distinct than we are from like gorillas, but they're the same species. So that's another thing I think is a bit of a human bias there. And it's also, Linnaean taxonomy doesn't really matter that much, I guess. It's mostly just convention. But yeah, that's the end of my slideshow.
Sweet. So if that were your majors, the focus of your degree is at right now, or you study more things?
Well, I haven't really started specializing into like specific like subfields right now. So technically I'm a bio major, and I'm on the evolutionary and ecology track with a focus in evolutionary. So I just say I'm an evolutionary biology major. I don't think I'll start specializing into like specific time periods like that unless like I go to grad school or something. But honestly, my biggest interest, I would say, would be like Pleistocene still, and just like the Cenozoic. I do think the sea to land transition is a very interesting transition because it's a huge macroevolutionary change. But if you break it up stepwise, it's very linear, and it actually makes a lot of sense.
So is that why you came up with your? Is that why you came up with your YouTube name?
Yeah, well, I'm pretty proud of my YouTube name personally. I came up with it because, yes, there's certain things about phylogenetics that have just sort of stuck in my mind my whole life. So the idea that like birds are dinosaurs or that humans are fish, because if you're going to accept things like fish as a taxonomic, like a true taxonomic clade, then you have to be fish, or else, a coelacanth isn't a fish, and neither is a shark. And so that was one part of my name. Another part of my name is just my name's Walker. So, yeah. And then lastly, I have like the human legs on the coelacanth because it's sort of a pun on the creationist interpretations of what they think the sea to land transition looked like. But yeah. So it's a couple of different puns. It has layers, like an onion.
Oh yeah. It's funny. I watched a video on YouTube talking about how it was a video about worms. Mm-hmm. They said that we are more closely related to fish than some worms are to other worms.
Yeah, Annelida. So annelids first diversified back in the Cambrian, right? Like we have true annelids, we have polychaetes from I think like Cambrian stage 2 or something, which is 500 million years ago. And that means, obviously there was the major split between all annelids at that point, whereas we don't have the Osteichthyes split until about 420, 430 million years ago. So we're about 100 million years closer to fish than worms are to each other. And there's certain worms that are even more divided, like nematode. Like it depends how you define worms. If you're specifically looking at like crown group worms, like annelids, then 500 million years. Yeah,
the video said there's 12 different phylums of worms almost.
Yeah, there's so many worms. Worms rule the world, honestly, because if you count nematodes or platyhelminths, I think is what they're called, which is like flatworms. If you count both of those as worms, then like the split goes all the way back to the bilateralian split, right? It goes all the way back to Urbilateralia, which would have been Ediacaran at least, maybe even like Cryogenian. Like that split is.
And we and fish are in the same chordate phylum.
Yeah, and we're honestly relatively closely related. I think that's another thing I find kind of cool. Like, one, how closely related we are to every other essentially animal that we see every day. The difference between us and dogs is pretty minimal. But it also, like, how weird certain things are, like arthropods and trees.
Yeah.
Those are almost aliens.
Yeah, science is weird sometimes. Like, I tell you my niece, like, that like say goldfish and tuna are more related to us than they are the sharks.
Yeah. Well, there's so many different layers to that as well. Like we're more closely related to lungfish than we are to coelacanths, and we're more closely related to coelacanths than we are to like a tuna, and then we're more closely related to tuna than sharks. And so, and vice versa, they're more closely related to us than they are the sharks. What'd you say?
Tuna are more like tuna. They look similar, but tuna are more closer to us than they are the sharks. Even they look similar.
Yeah, and then it even it keeps going back. Like we're more closely related to them than like hagfish.
And then fungus are more close related to us than they are to regular plants.
Yeah, fungus are almost sessile animals. That's how a lot of people refer to them, because they're like a little bit more basal than sponges. There's a couple of like Protus bacteria that are in between us and fungus, but for the most part, we're pretty close. And plants are literally on the other side of Eukaryota.
Yeah. The only thing that this more distant is the archaea and the bacteria.
Yeah. Well, that's another like crazy thing, because we're more closely related to archaea than we are to bacteria, and there's certain like types of bacteria that we're more closely related to than those bacteria are to other bacteria.
Yeah, because of the endosymbiosis thing.
Well, yeah. Well, endosymbiosis that confuses where you draw the line at life, in my opinion. But I mean, just even phylogenetic with nuclear DNA, right? Bacteria is huge, and we evolved out of bacteria, but that means that there are still strains that are more closely related to us than there are to like E. coli's on the other end, right? They're pretty primitive bacteria. Yeah. Whereas like there's more derived bacteria that are pretty close to us comparatively.
And then there's also, where you draw the line of viruses and stuff, or where they come from. Are they like a offshoot brand? Did we like when RNA came? Did we divide from them then? One side became DNA and cells, the other side became viruses, or they split off between somewhere in the middle, or both, or whatever. It's all crazy.
Yeah, that's such an interesting. That's a very interesting debate for me. Like, are viruses alive? Because they fill almost everything other than like homeostasis. And I don't the line even with viruses, you have pretty complex viruses to pretty simple viruses to like protoviruses, which are pretty much just circles of RNA. And at that point,
Speaking of viruses, I heard that they're thinking about taking some like phage bacteria viruses to replace some antibacterial stuff. Since the bacteria can be like since bacteria can evolve to be what's the word, like immune to antibacterial stuff,
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I actually did some research on like phages and phage therapy first semester. So nice. Yeah, that's another pretty interesting thing.
So I would have to ask this, but I guess I already know the answer. But you're definitely not like an anti-vaxxer person, then.
No, definitely not. Yeah, that's. I mean, so my channel right now has pretty much been exclusively evolutionary biology and like counter creation. Yeah. But I do have plans in the future to like branch out a bit more to just pseudoscience in general, because I think it's all kind of interesting, and I don't know if entertaining is the right word. Yeah, but you know what I mean. Like,
I said this before. It says I understand creationists more than I understand flat earthers, because creationists have only like 100, 200 years to get with the program. Flat earthers had a lot longer to get with.
Yeah. I agree with you. There's some people that think they're equally ridiculous. I don't know if I necessarily agree with that sentiment. But I do think creationism is equally wrong. So yeah,
equally wrong. Like so they even though they had 100 years, most people get for 100 years, 200 years. Flat Earth had like 2,000 years to get with like Earth's round 2,000 years ago.
Yeah, I don't know. I feel bad almost for flat earthers, because that's something I feel like creationists in a lot of ways, some of them are conspiratorial for sure. But I think the conspiratorial mindset of flat earthers, where it's like everyone's lying to you, the government's lying to you, NASA's lying to you, everyone on the street's lying to you, that's just a really bad mindset to have. that could be like a damaging mindset if you're afraid to go outside because you think the person at your local grocery store is lying to you.
Well, that's pretty much what the same mindset that the vaxxers have,
Yeah, I think anti-vaxxing movement, I wouldn't call it a movement, but that idea, I guess, is probably the most dangerous pseudoscience. At least damaging as in like immediate responses, right?
I think probably they don't understand that they don't know how evolution works too, because they don't understand why they get a flu shot every year,
Yeah, well, I think the interesting thing about anti-vaxxers is they sort of cross partisan lines. So you have people like the hippie-ish type people who are against anti-vax, and you also have like the super far-right evangelical people who are anti-vax. Together they unite on this crazy pseudoscience.
Probably for different reasons though. Like one is like, oh, we can use our mushrooms, or one side is probably more
homeopathy and stuff.
Yeah, like I'll just use this plant to cure my polio or measles.
Yeah. Gosh. Yeah, homeopathy is also insane. Although I think I don't know. Maybe it's just because I'm not from a very religious place. I'm from a very religious place. I'm not from a very like liberal place. I've never met someone who's like new age pseudoscience, like hippie-ish pseudoscience.
Yeah. Yeah, I see these arguments on Facebook all the time. They're like, I never got sick before, but I got my vaccine and I got sick for the first time ever. I got sick because I got the vaccine. So like, because I also don't know how vaccines work. I don't know how that works completely, but basically vaccines give you like a little weakened or dead version of the virus. So if the real thing ever attacks you, you basically like, hey, I know this guy. Let's kill it before it hurts.
Yeah. My favorite thing is whenever coronavirus first like started becoming a big thing, and like I was actually seeing people saying like viruses aren't real, and to me that was such a crazy thing because I have pictures of viruses that I have taken myself. You know what I mean? Like I have like electron microscope viruses from bacteriophages.
Yeah. I have a friend whose mom has polio, because she had it before the vaccine happened. Mm-hmm. She definitely wishes they had a vaccine back then for polio.
Yeah, that's really sad. But
I missed the chickenpox vaccine by a few years because I had it when I was 4 or 5. And it came out a few years later. The vaccine did, so I got chickenpox as a kid.
I don't think I've never been like super sick. I've had the flu once or twice before. I remember when like H1N1 came around back in 2009, 2010. I remember I got sick from that. But everyone did, everyone who was in school at the time.
Yeah, I remember that they talked about years ago. I remember that one being that big of a deal 10 years ago. I remember that well. I don't think it was that big of a pandemic as this one came out to be.
Well, I think more people were infected by H1N1, but the problem is the virality of the SARS-CoV-2 is much worse. Like something like 1-ish%, maybe a little bit less than 1% of all people who contract it die, which that's a very, very large number, especially considering this is a very foreign virus. There's some people who might have had some immunity or like ability to fight off H1N1 just because we've been around influenza since the beginning of time.
Oh yeah, that's another thing. People on Facebook are like, people are saying only 1% of people die from this thing. Like, well, that's still a lot of people. It's 7 billion people, 1%.
Yeah, there's people who are like, oh well, 60 million people, or not 60 million, jeez. 60,000 people die of the flu every year, and it's like, okay, great, we don't need another 300,000 people to die from coronavirus.
Yeah, because like at this point we're used to the flu's been 100 years, so flu's been around for like 100 years plus years, so it's sure people are going to die from it and the new thing.
Yeah, and I mean, not even just like more people, like we shouldn't have like just more people dying and just be fine with it. Just because a certain amount of people die from the flu every year doesn't mean it's fine to just have more people die. Like, it's such a bad argument.
Yeah. Oh God. Oh, so. Oh yeah. Speaking of viruses and stuff, do you know a lot about ERVs?
I'm pretty familiar with them. I'm very well informed about like the concept of them. I don't know like specifics about like which ERVs we have and stuff, but I'm pretty familiar with like retroviruses and stuff. So
Yeah, all I know basically about them is the viruses decide, hey, I'm gonna take a normal cell. I'm gonna go after this sperm or egg generating cell, and then all of a sudden, all the kids have the same virus, all the cells.
yeah, well, pretty much a lot of the endogenous retroviruses we have been shut off. Most of them due to like things like methylation. Some of them due to mutations. And that's a big reason why you can construct phylogenies based on retroviruses, because the insertion point for a retrovirus that we have is the same insertion point that a chimpanzee has, but not the same one that a gorilla has. So you can tell, okay, well, that virus infected our last common ancestor with chimpanzees, and then that virus has stayed shut off, obviously, because sometimes if you demethylate the regions of like ERVs, then sometimes they can become viruses again and attack your cells. So
I was thinking, I was true. I read this thing where apparently ERVs are the reason we have placentas now.
Yeah, okay, so that's another thing I'm not super well informed on, but if I remember correctly, the ERV used a promoter. Well, it's happened like multiple times, but the ERV used a promoter from like an adjacent gene, and what it does is it suppresses your immune system when you're pregnant, because that's what viruses do. They suppress your immune system. And so that's what helped us. It's what helped like mothers not attack their children while they're in the womb.
Like immune system. Oh, a parasite. Let's kill it.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, that's actually something kind of interesting, because, obviously the child has foreign DNA, so your body's probably going to recognize it like a parasite.
That's probably why things like marsupial branches get birthed really fast.
Yeah. Yeah, it was a pretty big evolutionary leap for us. But another thing that's interesting is what's the word? Viviparity of live birth. It's actually not super exclusive to mammals. There's plenty of fish and plenty of reptiles that give live birth.
Yes, a few snakes, a few fish, and amphibians. I think the only one that doesn't give live births are the dinosaurs, birds.
Yeah, I can't think of any like bird species but I wouldn't be surprised if we found a bird species that gave live birth either. So yeah, that's just something I think is kind of interesting. And to me, it's even funnier how like clear the transition was from monotremes with still having their shells to marsupials, which have very premature births to us.
Yeah, the thing I thought that some mammals do lay eggs.
Yeah,
because marsupials. I mean, monotremes are still mammals technically. There's still.
Yeah, well, yeah, that's a cladistic thing. But I think that's really interesting, and that's another thing. I think a lot of creationists don't listen to their arguments because they're like, look, it's a mammal that lays eggs, therefore evolution is false. And it's like, yeah, that's predicted. That's a great example. Thank you for bringing that up. Like, I honestly think, obviously evolution would still be true even if monotremes were extinct, but monotremes are a great strengthening. They strengthen the argument in favor of evolution quite a bit, just because we still have a mammal that lays eggs.
Oh yeah, I also talked about this. That how some the DNA stuff is either strict thing or morphology thing, or totally blowing it out of the water. Like apparently, I talked with Jackson and Tony before, like how we used to think that bats to be close to the primates or something like that. Big bats to be close to primates. All of a sudden, all of a sudden, stay way over the other side of the thing now.
Yeah. There were some actually really interesting theories, because bats are kind of morphologically similar to primates, like the megabats are.
Yeah.
So like the giant fruit bats and stuff, they thought those were primates, whereas the other bats, the other chiropterans, I think, or the microbats, were about where they are.
Probably because
For some reason, I don't know why that was a theory, because to me it makes sense for.
Because they look like more like because they look like what's that thing?
The Colugos?
Yeah, probably.
Yeah.
But then they're like DNA came out. They're like,
yeah. I think I would be more surprised. I mean, maybe I'm just hindsight's 2020, but I feel like I would be more surprised if bats were completely unrelated groups.
Yeah. And then I think the fun one is the hippo whale comparison.
Yeah. Yeah, whales are artiodactyls, right? Like nested within the ungulates. That's something that's interesting to me. Whales are more closely related to cows than cows are to horses. Phylogeny is weird.
So was it hard for I just learned about this recently. So I had to transfer from the old taxidermic thing to cladistics recently. Not recently, but transition from the old 7 layers to now the 80 layers we have now.
Yeah. The Linnaean system is I'm kind of torn on it, right? Because I think the Linnaean system is very bad, but I think it's also very useful. Because if you mention a Linnaean rank, it gives people a general idea of what we're talking about.
Yeah, it's more. I think it's probably for basic, simple understanding, probably.
Yeah. Well, I mean, like I was talking about, there's 2 species of coelacanths in the same genus that are more different than we are from New World monkeys, and there's 1 species of coelacanth that has 2 populations with more divergence than us and gorillas, right?
Yeah.
It's
also coelacanth and stuff like that. They're probably more close to us, but you ever know when we split up? Some animals more related to us than other animals than they are each other. Say, you know what I mean? Like coelacanths. Probably all coelacanths are more closely related to each other than they are to us, probably, right?
Yeah. Well, yeah. They've separated after the KPG extinction, so they're actually more closely related to each other than any fossil we've ever found of the coelacanth still. But they're more closely related to each other than we are, just because we separated from them 40 million years or 400 million years ago, roughly.
I talked earlier about our rivalry with the ravenfish.
Mm-hmm.
They had a joking. The joke, evolution-wise, I think I joked before. Other rivalry would be with the protostomes.
The protostome deuterostome rivalry.
Yeah, because they got the land before we did, right?
Yeah.
And
I would definitely say we're losing to protostomes.
And they also beat us the air too. Probably the first insects were in the flying insects were probably in the Carboniferous. That's way before the pterodactyls and birds and bats. So they beat us the land and the air.
Yeah, I honestly, and also ants way more than humans, and ants are just a subclass of Hymenoptera. We are very, very much if you're going by biomass, we are being destroyed by arthropods alone, and you still have mollusks and everything else that's a protostome. How many fossils do we have in this lineage from Sarcopterygil? What do you mean by that? Do you mean that I had a slideshow with just a few. Honestly, I just sort of scratched the surface of
technically human fossils are in this lineage too.
Yeah. Oh gosh. If we're going back from humans all the way to the first lobe-finned fish, gosh, that would be quite a few fossils.
Also, do you think we eat chickens and turkeys now via dinosaurs as revenge for when they used to eat us?
Yeah, well, that was started. I'm pretty sure there was a mammal in the late Jurassic or something that was known to eat small dinosaurs.
Yeah.
So that's where it started, I'm assuming.
Then they
that was the beginning of our revenge. He was the nighttime vigilante.
Oh yeah, that reminds me of the diapsid synapsid rivalry. In the Permian, the synapsids pretty much ruled the Earth, and then we lost. And then the Mesozoic, the diapsid took over, and then they died. We took over again at the Cretaceous period, like Valley of the Earth, like how we're in charge now. We'll wait.
Well, I don't know if that's too fortunate for us, because maybe maybe the diapsids will reclaim their position on top in the future, overtaken by my crested gecko right here.
Yeah, and I also joked with Erica about this, about how the monkeys, simians were like the new worlds were like the old world monkeys were like, hey, I bet you guys can't jump over to the other kind over there. Like, oh yeah, I bet we can. And that's how the new world monkeys got over to South America. A little bet between primates. Probably not. But what's the weirdest thing about science that you know of?
Oh, like within phylogeny specifically?
What I guess that, but really anything really.
Well, with regards to phylogeny specifically, I think honestly just the fact that we're fish and like birds are dinosaurs, like just how many crazy things, because or like birds are more closely related to crocodiles than crocodiles are to lizards, and phylogeny is a really weird thing when you zoom out and you're not looking at it from like this very small time scale that we have right now.
I think for me it would be the chemistry thing, and not chemistry, but like for example, like both oxygen and hydrogen are flammable gases, right? You put them together, you have water.
Yeah.
And also both sodium and chlorine are poisonous to us, right?
Mm-hmm.
Put them together, you get salt.
You got table salt. Yeah. I guess we're zooming out to like chemistry and I guess physics. Quantum mechanics is crazy. Just the idea that like something, an electron. I think the buckyballs are like 60 carbon atoms, and we've still gotten wave behavior out of them, and that's that's crazy to me. And to me, the weirdest thing about it is it only changes its attributes if you measure it, right? So, does that mean it's one of those things like if a tree falls in the forest, will anyone hear it? If a tree falls in the forest, is it a wave or a particle? Because no one's there to observe it. Like that's brain breaking to me.
Also, observing things without a telescope, your natural eyes, you think about up in the stars, like how many stars up there you see in the sky at night are still there technically in real time. They haven't really exploded. They died years ago, and we don't know it yet because it takes forever to light get to us.
Yeah, well, don't you know that all the stars were put there 6,000 years ago, and supernovas are just fireworks for us to gaze upon? Yeah, no, it's like I said, deep time, just really big numbers. Our tiny brains are terrible at dealing with big numbers. Humans really only evolved to count anything between like 0 and 1,000, and once you get to like 1,000,000, 1,billion, these are big numbers. Who cares? But the difference between 1,000,000 years ago and 1,billion years ago is insane. 1,000,000 years ago, you have like Homo erectus, so you almost have us. And if you go back 1,billion years ago, I think that's in the middle of the boring billion. So it's
we're still at that point. I know at that point I don't even know if multicellular creatures have arrived yet. At that point,
no, 1,billion years ago there definitely weren't multicellularity. There may have been eukaryotes, maybe. Like we're still in like the early like cyanobacteria and stuff. Like that. It's just big numbers. Big numbers are weird.
Yeah, it's like 1,000 years, like even close time. 1,000 years ago, Europe was still forming it together, and 2,000 years ago, it was the Roman time.
Yeah. Well, okay, so Jesus is closer in age to the opening of the first Arby's, I think it is, than Jesus is to the opening or to like the building of the pyramids in Egypt.
Yeah, I've heard that.
Yeah, and like while the pyramids were being built, there were still mammoths living in Wrangel Island. Yeah, so anything that's like outside of our lifetime, it's hard to deal with other than it just in like math and numbers, in my opinion, at least.
Of course, it doesn't. It never happened because were you there?
Yeah, I didn't observe the pyramids, therefore I don't know if they exist.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I haven't seen your. I haven't seen your. Yeah, I haven't seen one of your one videos. So it doesn't exist either. So I haven't seen it yet.
Yeah, it doesn't exist. No. Well, I'm very surprised that I got so many views from it. Like I think I have 100-ish subs, and I have 2 views. Both of them have like over 250 views, which to me is like mind blowing. I thought like maybe 30 people would see it.
It's always good. It's always good when you have more views than you have subscribers.
Yeah, well, we'll see. I think that is good because, like I said, it kind of takes a bit of pressure off, I guess, as far as like having to appease subs. I feel like I wouldn't have as much of an obligation to make content if I had, 300 subs like I do on one of my videos.
Yeah, a long time ago, I decided, to post videos that even though posting some videos would probably make them more popular. I post videos that I want to post, not to gain popularity, just because I like the subject.
Yeah, that's something I kind of want to implement. Like I was talking with Speed of Sound earlier today about this, and I think for me, I want to post things that I'm interested in instead of posting things that I feel like people would enjoy, just so that like, and at the end of the day, I really don't care that much about like subs, and I don't think I'm ever going to get like a Patreon or anything like that because I just don't want to be like held accountable to a group of people. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
I just want to like post about what I enjoy.
I do like. I would let my subs gain a little bit because there's a thing on YouTube, but there are probably some. I play some games on YouTube too. There are probably some games that are more popular that if I played that I probably get more views and stuff. But I don't like those games. I'm not interested in those games.
Mm-hmm.
Speaking of games, you play any video games or anything like that?
Okay, so it's been a bit. I used to play more video games in high school, and I got rid of my desktop computer whenever I went off to college, so I don't really have anything to play. I have a Switch, so I've been playing like games on my Switch pretty frequently, but not like any PC games.
I have a Switch too. After this, maybe we can exchange Switch
codes. Yeah, all right. Yeah, I mostly just like play it socially, I guess. Like if I'm with friends or if I'm like talking to friends, I'll play it with them. But I don't play too many games by myself anymore.
Yeah, I mainly right now. I've always liked RPG games. I always liked RPGs and stuff. And right now I'm into visual novels.
Really, I have a friend who's right now like just got in like super into JRPGs, and he's playing Xenoblade for like the 3rd time.
Yeah,
and played all the Fire Emblems recently.
Yeah, my favorite game series right now is still the Kingdom Hearts series.
Really? I remember playing Kingdom Hearts. I don't remember if it was 1 or 2 whenever I was pretty little. It was on like the Wii.
Yeah. Technically I own I own Kingdom Hearts 1 for the PS2, PS3, and PS4. So that's how into it I was. Oh, the game came out. Gotta get the new system. Gotta get the new system. Like,
yeah.
The only games I don't own are the Game Boy game ones.
Are there Kingdom Hearts Game Boy exclusives?
Well, technically, yes. Kind of. There's the. There's 358 days and recoded for the DS, right?
Mm-hmm.
And they technically, but when they made the the big bundle things, the PS4, PS3, and PS4 systems. For those two games, they only put the cutscenes on the system, not the game. So you can watch what happened, and that they're like cutscene versions, but you can't actually play the game on the PS4 version. So you still gotta get the original games, or you gotta get off the emulators.
Huh.
So yeah. It's terrible because.
Yeah. Really, the only single player game that I've ever been super into is like the Pokemon series.
Oh yeah, I haven't besides Go for a while. I haven't played Last time I played a Pokemon game, realistically, not emulator, was Gold and Silver. That's when I stopped playing it.
Really, the like Hard Gold and Soul Silver, or like Gold and Silver?
Original Gold and Silver.
Wow. Okay, so like Gen 2. That's been a while.
I never even got Crystal, the reboot version of that. So because after that, because the Game Boy Advance was the last Game Boy I owned.
When did Gold and Silver even come out?
About 2000, I think, 2001.
November 21st, 1999. Wow. I've played every generation that I've been alive for, and then I played like Gen 1 and Gen 2 back on emulators.
I was right out of high school when the original games came out. So.
Yeah. Well, I was born in 2000, so I've played Gen 3, Gen 4, Gen 5, Gen 6, Gen 7, and Gen 8.
Yeah, I grew up on the original Nintendo and Atari.
Really? Yeah, no. I was Game Boy Advanced first, and then I got a Wii, and then I didn't get a Wii U, but now I have a Switch. So
yeah,
I had a DSi at some point.
Yeah, I had a Game Boy, a Game Boy Pocket, a Game Boy Color, and a Game Boy Advance.
Yeah.
But then never got the DS because by that point I had transferred over to the PlayStation.
Is that like PSP and stuff?
Well, yeah, I never got the PSP, but the PlayStation 2, PlayStation 3, PlayStation 4.
Oh, okay.
Never got the portable PlayStation games like the Vita or the PSP.
Mm-hmm. I've never had like a console. My brother has a PlayStation 4 somewhere, but the only consoles I've ever had have been Nintendo consoles. So the Wii and the Switch, and the Switch is even like arguably, it's arguably handheld.
It's more of a hybrid, I guess.
Yeah. I mostly played PC like throughout middle school and high school.
Well, problem in middle school, high school, when I was PC, games I could. It was when I was in high school. PCs were more primitive still. Not as like what's the word house size primitive, but the floppy disk, and the 5 gigabyte hard drives on your computer was a big deal. Like, oh my god, my computer's whole 5 gigabyte hard drive space. That's awesome. That's a lot of space.
Yeah, I think I'm about as old as you can be and have grown up with like the age of modern computing, because I've sort of like grown up with computers my whole life, and they've been getting more advanced as I've been getting more.
So have I think I got on the beginning of it, like I said with the 5-inch floppy disks.
Yeah. Well, I just mean like I feel like computers have been almost the same since I was a kid. Like I remember like Windows Vista.
Oh, I hated Vista.
Yeah. Because that's like the earliest operating system that I remember.
Yeah, my earliest Windows was Windows 95. Mm-hmm. Or actually, no, it was 3.1. But yeah, but Vista. I hate Vista. Every time I want to delete something in the program or something or file, it was like, "Are you sure you want to delete this?" Like, yes. Are you positive? Like 3 times. Like, yes, I want to delete this damn thing.
Yeah. Yeah, I don't even. I mean, I mostly used like Windows 7 up until Windows 10 came out, pretty much. So like from the time Windows 7 came out to time Windows 10 came out, it was pretty much all I used. So that's what, like 10-ish years at least.
I skipped over 8 completely.
Yeah, I don't think I ever had 8. If I did, it wasn't by choice. It was by like an accidental software update or something.
Oh, and then I briefly went. My very first computer would have to. I had my very first computer was an Apple II computer.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I don't. My family had a desktop. It was probably just some generic HP. But yeah.
Oh, then did you ever do the dial-up call?
Well, I know how to do like rotary dial-up and stuff like that. I've never had to do it for like internet. You said that you had dial-up internet. I've never had that.
Yeah, it's very bad. I used to play an online game, FF11, Final Fantasy 11, via dial-up. So I had to download patches. I had to keep my computer on all night long to do it because I couldn't do it in the daytime because people enter the call or people pick the phone up and the texting terminated. All that.
Oh my gosh.
So yeah, it was very thing. Of course, that was pre YouTube too. So just playing games was bad enough, but once videos started happening, like okay, buffer for 5 minutes. Okay, 2 seconds of video. Okay, another 5 minutes of buffering. 2 more seconds of video. Technology. All right, so I guess we're at this point we're just talking. So anything before we go? Anything you want to advertise on about coming up on your channel or anything?
I have. I guess I still do have future plans. I should have a video coming out about Proboscidean phylogeny soon, and then Proboscideans on the Ark pretty soon, because that's an interesting problem that I've sort of found. I think it's pretty funny. And then also I want to watch a flat Earth video with one of my friends who's studying astrophysics. I want to see what he thinks of all that. So,
cool. Well, I hope you come on my channel again in the future. Maybe we can talk about another animal group or something.
Okay. Yeah, like anytime you want to talk about phylogeny, just let me know. I'm pretty sure everyone else is either sick of hearing about it or just doesn't want to in general.
Well, my audience hasn't heard about yet, so I'm always into learning new things.
Yeah. Oh no, that's great. I also love learning new stuff. So.
Yeah. In fact, that's my closing catchphrase. All right. So you guys never stop learning. Enjoy the randomness. I'll see you next time. Bye.